Welcome to Mana TV and Mana TV International, and namaste to all our viewers today who have joined this exciting interview with comedian Rajiv Satyal. My name is Shohini Sharkar, and I'm representing Hindu Students Council. Hindu Students Council is excited to bring you this live event in partnership with Mana TV. Hindu Students Council is an international community providing opportunities for college students and young professionals to learn about Hindu heritage through various activities, events, and projects. Hindu Students Council is a registered nonprofit in the US and one of the largest Hindu youth organizations outside of India. Let's welcome our chief guest today, comedian Rajiv Satyal. He is joining us from California right now, and we are so excited to have him as our first speaker in a series on Hindus pursuing creative and unconventional careers. Rajiv Ji is a Hindu Los Angeles-based comedian. His TV Clean act has made him one of the most versatile comedians working today. Rajiv Ji has some interesting claims to fame. He opened for Prime Minister Narendra Modi in front of 17,000 people. He made the viral I Am Indian video, which has been seen over 50 million times and which you can also see on his webpage, funnyindian.com. He co-created the world-touring Make Chai Not War, a Hindu-Muslim stand-up show, and he has interviewed everyone from Deepak Chopra to Seth Godin to Preeti Zinta. Rajiv Ji, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Namaskar, namaste, and wow, Rajiv G. I feel like I'm, Kevin G from Mean Girls. You can just call me Rajiv.
All right, so before we dive into learning more about your career, I would love to delve into your background more and the environment that you grew up in. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like to grow up as a Hindu in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the 1980s?
Yes, so it was interesting in the sense that, growing up, basically being born in 1976, or reborn, I should say reborn, right? This is the Hindu Students Council. So I was reborn in 1976, a long time ago. I'm much older than a lot of people on Zoom call. We're on Zoom, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube Live, got Facebook Live, got a lot of live stuff going on. This is really like the number of lives that Hindus have, right? This is just life after life after life for the Hindus who have joined. So pretty cool. It was interesting growing up at that time because there really were not that many Hindus around me. I mean, 4 because my parents and my brothers. But when I went to school, it was just, they say it's the water in which you're swimming. The fish don't know that they're in water, right? That's their air. And, that was Christianity. That was basically like today is Ramadan in the Muslim faith. And you just had people it was like a default button when you filled in the circles, are you white, black, or other? We were other. And then for religion, not that you have to fill in a form, but it was just, that was kind of like the normal, so to speak. And then everything around that was something other. So it was definitely a different time growing up in Ohio in the 80s as a Hindu. It's just not something that really occurred to me. It wasn't I had 2 lives, which I think is maybe still true for the Gen Z and the iGen, and certainly for millennials, but absolutely for Gen X, which was you had your white friends, Matt and Chris and Mark and Dave and those people that you went to the football games with and all that. And then you had your whole other life where you're at the Hindu temple and you're doing arti and swaha. And, I had a negotiation with my parents because arti basically happened at 1 p.m. at our Hindu temple. So there was a Hindu temple in Cincinnati. It was the basement of a house. And you took off your shoes, of course. You went inside. And as it grew and grew, then we built a new Hindu temple in Cincinnati, Ohio, east of Cincinnati. But the negotiation was, I was so into pop culture, and I still am, that I had to hear Casey Kasem count down the #1 song in America. Like every week, I had to know what it was. And there was no internet back then. There was no YouTube. There's no Facebook. So everybody was waiting to know if Rajiv Satyal knew what the #1 song was. So I go, look, he announces it at 12:58. I will be in temple from 12 till 12:57. I will have my legs crossed. I will be sitting there. I will not talk to any friends. 12:57, I'm out that door. I'm going into the parking lot. I'm taking my dad's keys. I'm listening to the radio for 2 minutes. I'm coming back for Arthi at 1 o'clock. And that was the negotiation. There was no better blend of the world of India and America, Hindu, Christian, whatever you want to call it, than those 3 minutes that happened in Cincinnati, Ohio every Sunday.
Well, that sounds like a lot of, clashes and also just a lot of diversity and fun to be able to have both of those. So I wanted to ask you, like, how did you make your decision to go into comedy? And like, we're always curious, what career path were you choosing before? Were you like being asked to be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, like the typical things that Indian students are generally asked to be? And then, like, how did you make that decision to go into comedy?
It's a great question. And I tell you what, a lawyer in the Indian community in the 80s, you may as well be a comedian. Okay. Lawyer was like total fail. Like it was doctor, and it still kind of is, right? Like doctor is still like 100 out of 100. And then below that is an engineer, software engineer somewhere there. And then you have like a lawyer, and then maybe businessman, and comedian is not really even on the chart at all. So law was not even, this is how conservative it was in the Indian community, the South Asian community back then. So of course I was pre-med, and it was just like those bubbles I'm talking about, like white, black, other, the Christian bubble. And then for Indians, especially Hindus, it was very much doctor. That's it. You're pre-med. And I just went to Antarctica. And Shohini, you know, we were talking about the whole Antarctica thing last year about how I was going to go and all this. And my friend Joe and I went. Well, Joe was my roommate at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland in college. And he was the token white guy at a lot of the Desi parties. And he would come to these things with me, which was super fun. And we were on this cruise to Antarctica. So, of course, we had a ton of time to talk about this over the Drake Passage. And, you know, I said that my parents raised me, and my parents are amazing people, but it's like what people say, I'm not racist, but okay, so I'm gonna pull the rug out right now, okay? They're great, but they always raised us to believe that when you're smart, you become a doctor, okay? Joe's parents, and Joe's dad became the vice president of sales at Procter & Gamble, okay? So just an enormous position, very successful, one of my mentors to this day. Joe goes, it's interesting because my parents raised me to believe that when you're smart, you can do anything you want. And he goes, I'm not saying that's better. I go, no, that's way better. That's way better. That is a way better upbringing. Like whatever you're doing, if you're really honest with yourself and your friends and you're getting good feedback and you hear you are really good at poetry or painting or whatever it is, if you're smart, you'll figure it out. And I'm glad to see there is some of that relaxation within the Hindu community, because it's great that a lot of people became doctors. You could see that during the coronavirus epidemic. I'm watching MSNBC, white host, panel of 3 brown people, literally doctor, doctor, doctor. You're going, this is what happens when a bunch of Hindus settle into a place and basically force their kids to become doctors. You take over these panels, right? You get on TV regardless. Had I known that I was going to be on a panel as a doctor, maybe I would have got through with it. But that was pretty much it. I was pre-med, got into a 6-year medical program. I didn't go. And until I opened for Sri Modi in front of 17,000 people in Silicon Valley, my parents did not forgive me. Okay, so this is just like a few years ago. My parents go, okay, he finally made it, right? But pre-med was a thing at Case Western, so I went there. It didn't go so hot because my heart wasn't in it. I don't like biology to this day. It's my only topic that my eyes glaze over. My wife is a pharmacist, and God bless her, she loves that stuff. But man, what a topic. I could not care less about the human body, how it works, who cares? And so if you don't care about the human body, then maybe don't become a doctor. Maybe that's not your thing exactly. So I decided to go into engineering, transferred to the University of Cincinnati, graduated first in my class in materials engineering. And actually, I was number 1 for 15 of 16 quarters. But then I majored in electrical engineering for a few classes, or took some classes, I should say. So I ended up number 2 because I was taking these really difficult PN junction wafer fabrication classes, and I had no background in V equals IR. And some of you guys know what I'm talking about. The rest of you are like, what? Somebody just left. Okay, so that point being that essentially engineering, and then I basically went very left to right brained. After that, I worked at Procter & Gamble, P&G, Punjabis and Gujaratis, did that for 6 years, moved to LA, and then I went into comedy.
Well, thanks for telling us all about that. I mean, I think that's really inspirational to a lot of students out there who feel like they're kind of getting pushed into doing, you know, engineering or going into med school just because they feel like that's what they're required to do or supposed to do. And, you know, part of this whole series is to question that and, you know, talk about all these different career paths that young people can join. So I wanted to know, how does being Hindu affect your career as a comedian?
You know, For the most part, I would say that it's been a real help because, most of the people for whom I perform, so in terms of number of gigs, there's no question I'm at comedy clubs, general market audiences read white, mostly white, black, everybody in one room. That's the majority of gigs I do are going to be there, right? They're in comedy clubs. But in terms of how I make my living, a lot of that is the Desi community. And in the United States, most of that community, and even in India, is mostly Hindu, right? So I think there's that shared commonality of having that experience. When people say, why did you marry, or are you glad you married a fellow Indian? Why did you? Why was that important? And I go, well, Hinduism, really. I mean, that really kind of was the reason more than anything else. Was that was the common bond. If you look at India and its history, I love when people describe India as a young country. They're like, it's a young country, started in 1947. Like, this is just such a funny way of describing it, because obviously I see a lot of smiles here. Obviously we know ancient traditions, almost the cradle of civilization, so many things that happen. But in terms of a nation, that is true, right? I mean, you think about that. Russell Peters did a great bit about terrorists, and he goes, terrorists hate America, Indians hate each other. And I just love when he does that joke. It's just so funny, because I'm Punjabi, my wife's Gujarati, and there are cultural differences. I mean, for one thing, I'm really loud, and she can probably hear me right now in our house, and Punjabis are loud, dude. We turn up. It's just a very different culture from Gujaratis. I go to their house, they're much quieter. It's a whole different thing. And then you go to the South, and it's a completely different world. I mean, I was performing in Seattle at a Microsoft adjacent gig, and it was mostly Tamil folks. And I've been to Tamil Nadu. I performed in Chennai, great people on that tour you mentioned, Make China Not War, been there again. It's great, but it's a very, very different world. I mean, the skin tone is different. The food is different. The way they talk, not just the language, it's just, right? It's totally different. It's a completely different world. So if I look at that, I go, is this my people? You kind of go, well, sort of. What's the common bond? It's Hinduism. You guys are all Hindu. It's Hindustan, right? That's really the thing, more than the food, where we use a lot of tomatoes up north. They don't use tomatoes in the South. It's all coconuts. We don't really use coconuts in Punjab, right? So it's a whole different thing. And the one thing that unites that and has that common bond is Hinduism. So I'd say there's a pretty strong connection to the Hindu community.
Awesome. That's really great to hear. So I do want to go back to 2017. You wrote an article that was published in DNA India, and a bunch of us have read that article. It's titled, "Where Have All the Hindu American Comedians Gone?" So our next couple of questions are going to come from that article, or kind of inspired from that. So can you just tell us in your own words why you think there aren't more Hindu artists, whether they're actors or actresses or dancers, painters? Why are there not more Hindu artists in America?
It's a really hard question to answer. I was on with Sham out of Chicago, and we were talking about this. He reps his Hinduism pretty hard, Sham. And he, we were talking about this whole idea of, and it's an observation I made too, which was, you have Russell Peters, who's really the godfather of comedy, especially in the South Asian scene and Indian scene. And you were even mentioning, Shohini, that when you Google Hindu comedian, Russell Peters comes up. Well, Russell Peters is his real name. That's one of the questions he gets. And he talks about his parents, Eric and Maureen. They're Anglo-Indian, and nothing wrong with that. My dad's only brother is married to an Anglo-Indian woman. They live in Australia. We were just talking to them yesterday. Nothing wrong with that. But his family's from Kolkata. I guess we got to say now if we're talking Hinduism, right? I can't say Calcutta and the whole British Raj. So from Kolkata, and it's very Christian. And so there's that, and there's a lot of Christianity throughout India and that area. But he's Christian, and then you have a lot of the bigger comedians and actors who are Muslim, right? So my old roommate, Hassan Minhaj, you have Aziz Ansari, you have other people like that who are on TV in a big way. Rizwan Manji is an actor, Asif Ali is an actor, and those folks who are there. So you do have some who are Hindu, Aparna Nancherla, Hari Kondabolu, with whom I toured India as well, good friend. And I'm there, of course. So, but yeah, Paul Varghese, who's Christian. So this isn't really to divide us and go, well, you're this and we're that and whatever. But I think the reason maybe that a lot of the time Hinduism is this word, right? Because I do a lot of gigs for Hindu American Foundation, and Hindu is this dirty word, right? They want to say that it's like Vedic or it's yogic or something like that. But Hinduism and Hindu conjures up a different image in people's minds, which that's one thing we have to change, that it isn't this weird thing, and things like Bikram yoga don't help, but there are other things that are going on, that isn't really what Hinduism is any more than you would see, the perversion of Christianity or Islam or Judaism or any religion or even atheism, whatever it is. So I think we have to look at it that way. The other way to think about it is, obviously the culture here is very Christian, but then you have obviously there's been so much tension between Islam and the West, and that's a broad statement to say the West, but there is that, and I think you have voices and a need for voices like Hassan Minhaj and other folks to represent that community. Hinduism sort of falls in that middle of through the gap a little bit. It's almost like how men of color have sort of been skipped over a little bit. Now it's like, I can represent diversity, but people are like, well, can we get a woman of color? And you're going, well, I'm still a minority. Like, what happened to my voice? Doesn't that count? It's like, well, either it's like straight white male, sexual, cisgendered, straight white male, able-bodied, or then you've got like the complete opposite of that. So there's a gap into which Hindus fall. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just seems to be an observation. It's a lot for Shohini to manage when I stop talking, because my answers are so long and she doesn't know when I'm going to stop. I should start giving her a countdown, because she's managing like 3 different streams here, plus the questions that are coming in. So we got to give her a break. Patience is a virtue, right? So.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So now we want to turn to one of the students who is going to ask a live question to you. So our first question comes from Maitri Kale from Stony Brook University.
Hi, I'm Maitri. So my question was about your article. You kind of alluded to like some of the reasons why Hindu comedians aren't that well known, in addition to what you were just saying. But it seemed like you were saying that they have to like tap into the social media or Hollywood circuit. But I wanted to ask, what would be like the solution to that? And is there anything that we as the general public, Hindu public, can do to help new artists become more well known?
That is a really great question, and I really appreciate that, Maitri, because the question really is there anything that you can do at home, right, with social media or with Hollywood? So I think that the simple answer to that is follow us, right? Follow us online, follow our YouTube and our Instagram and TikTok, I guess. I haven't really posted anything on TikTok yet. I'm about to get there, but I don't know if it's stealing all our information or what's happening. I don't know. I keep hearing all these different things going on with TikTok, but I guess I got to get on there. So I do think it's a question of sharing our stuff, the content that people like Hari, Aparna, that I'm making, whatever. And I think that's really what's going to do it, is that you have to prove that there's an audience out there. I worked, like I said, at P&G, the Page, for years. And part of what I did for a couple of years was working in North America media and marketing. And this was back in the early zeros. That I was in that department, I'd say 02 to 04. So around 2003, right? And I remember the company was the world's largest advertiser. They spent, I think last year, $10 billion on advertising. So there were all these studies done of when will the Asian market, meaning East Asian like Chinese and South Asian like Indian and everyone else in that mix, mature enough where it's going to now justify their marketing dollars, because Hindus in America have a lot of marketing spend, right? But where is that critical mass for them to start to invest that money? Back in 03, they said it was going to be around 2010, and they were right. You could see the Asian marketing spend just start to really blow up. So when a community has a voice like that, that's what happens. So you have people like Tulsi Gabbard in the Congress who represents being Hindu, and Kirtan and all the stuff that she talks about. I think being more outspoken about being Hindu, and not that it's right or wrong. It's not a moral argument. It's just about visibility. And so when those numbers start to grow and people see that there's a community out there that's supporting people, and you see people out there performing, whether it's live, whenever we go back to that, or on social media, I think it's really just about promoting us and doing that, because you see the number of folks who, like Lily Singh is a great case study of someone who built something over time. And, we knew about her, Superwoman, for a long time. I met her years ago, many years ago. I don't know her well, met her one time. Super nice. And, you saw her go to TV now from that. And it's almost like a lot of these decisions are not being made in Hollywood anymore. It's whoever's got that following. I was working with a PR firm, PR, not PR, not love, a love firm, PR firm. I was working with a PR firm, and I remember talking about wanting to get more press. Of course, that's what they do. They're a public relations firm. And I remember, they always say to get one when you either are a series regular on TV, so you're on a TV show, or you book a feature film, so you're in a movie, or you've got a book, you got a novel or something coming out. And, I didn't have those things at the time. And I remember one of the co-owners being like, hey, you know what you should do? And she's older. And she just goes, you should get like 250,000 followers on Instagram. And then you can go ahead and book a series regular. And I go, without missing a beat, I go, it is easier for me to go into a room and book a role on TV or get in a movie than to go get 250,000 followers on Instagram. I mean, you may as well say, like, you know what you should do? You should go to the moon really quick and change your pants and come back. And it's like, okay, great. That's great advice. That's amazing, right? Or go shake hands with everybody in India. That's a great, don't shake hands right now. Give them the namaskar, right? But that's how out of touch a lot of Hollywood is. They don't realize how difficult that is. So you can tune in and watch our shows. That's awesome. But that's going to be very little in the clicking ability or the viewing ability. But the more that you share our stuff online, I think that's going to help.
Awesome. That's really great for us to know and for us to continue supporting our Hindu comedians and our Hindu actors and actresses and giving them that support from our community. So thanks for telling us more about that and how that process works. How do we push our Hindu artists to fame? You know, it's going to come from us. So I do have another question from another member of our live audience. So our next question comes from Arnav Kejriwal from the University or Washington University in St. Louis.
Namaste, Rajiv. Thanks for coming on. So yeah, I'm a WashU alum, and I was a poli-sci major. And one thing I've kind of noticed, and my friend Parth, who's also on the call, he does a lot of writing. And one thing I've noticed based on his writing and just what I've observed is that it's really easy for us to be part of the so-called like South Asian liberal community, or this like even Indian liberal community, right? As soon as you say like South Asian, it's kind of understood that you're a good minority. But when you try to break out and say, no, I'm a Hindu, kind of like you were saying, right? That's kind of this dirty word that everyone rejects and doesn't want to be a part of. So like, the perfect counterexample to that is someone like Aziz or not Aziz, but Hassan really, who does a really good job being kind of this loud Muslim who is very actively defending kind of the Muslim community's interests, and he's considered a liberal, right? So why don't Hindus get that same kind of courtesy, of being able to be loud, but being kind of firm and just about our community? Why don't we get that same privilege, and what do we have to do to earn it in the entertainment industry?
Arnav, it's a great question. It is a great question, and it's a riddle to which I do not have the answer. I've been thinking about this for a long time. So let me share what my thoughts are. And, I'm a moderate at the end of the day. I'm the man in the middle. I have a tour called The Man in the Middle, and I talk about being Hindu, talk about being Indian, and being in the middle. And that's kind of really what happens a lot of the time is you've got, like I was saying, you've got the conservatives on one side and the liberals on one side, and they both have gone farther and farther apart. And, people are like, pick a side. And that's what I say in my show. I go, we're told to choose a side. You go to a restaurant, they give you the menu, sit down, order the entree, says choose a side, right? So in every part of society, you're told to choose a side, whatever side that might be. So, Bill Maher, I think, does a really good job of this. And it's interesting because I was talking to my brother yesterday, who's an author, Rajiv Satyal. You might have read Blue Boy, which is actually how he talks about being the latest incarnation of Lord Krishna. It's very controversial because Rakesh grew up gay. He's gay, and he talks about being a gay boy in Ohio in the 80s and, dressing up and all the other stuff. And it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people who are not supportive or inclusive of that lifestyle. But it was one portrayal of Hinduism, which I liked. So he's not a big Bill Maher fan because he's very liberal. And, even last week or the week before, Bill Maher was talking about, why don't we just call it the Chinese virus? I mean, we call it West Nile. We call it all these other things. Like, how come there's this, tiptoeing around calling it the Chinese virus? I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but it is a question that is considered taboo to talk about. And I think it's time to understand also that there's a difference between Twitter and the real world, right? IRL. And you have the loud voices over there who are saying one thing, but really the silent majority is saying another. And one thing Bill Maher talks about is how liberals have totally failed when it comes to Islam, because they go, hey, we're pro-gay, we're pro-woman, we're pro-whatever, but then, whatever oppression may happen in any religion, they'll totally attack Christians for being, pro-life and, anti-woman and whatever like that. You could have a field day with Christianity. You can say whatever you want, which is part of why Trump won, right? You could just tear down Christmas, tear down Christians. That's totally cool if you do that. But the minute you say something against Islam, it's this weird world again where it's like our foreign policy is to destroy brown countries as a white country primarily here, and specifically Islam. I think the only time we went to defend Islam was probably in Kosovo in the 90s with Clinton and all the stuff that was going on there. But for the most part, it is a Christian Muslim, battle, and Judaism and Hindus are just kind of lost in the mix in this monotheism and the Abrahamic religions that are going on. And that's what Azhar Usman, actually, my co-creator for Make China at War, says. And of course, he's Muslim, and Mubarak, Ramadan Mubarak to you, Azhar. He says this. He goes, I refuse to call us minorities. He goes, it's crazy to call, we're not minorities. He goes, look at the world population. Look at, there's a map. If you Google it, it's something like more people live inside this circle than outside of it. And it's a circle almost entirely over China and India. That's the world. The world is in that circle, and everything outside of it is really not the world. That's where most people are. So he's like, screw you. We're not minorities. That's a crazy word to use. So we're people of color or some other phrase. So I think that's what ends up happening is there's this idea of like, you can't touch Islam because it's so charged. People are either scared or they are woke, but woke doesn't help. It doesn't help that because it's not then going whole hog, to mix metaphors. You're not going whole hog then. You're not saying, okay, let's go ahead and defend gays everywhere, wherever they may be, women everywhere, wherever they may be, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's really the tough thing. And it's actually, as a comedian, I'm more scared to go perform for a liberal audience than a conservative audience. And maybe a lot of the time it's because the racist stuff I'm saying up there they agree with. But a lot of the time you're just more afraid. I mean, I posted something about how I'd be much more scared to wear a MAGA hat in San Francisco than an Obama t-shirt in Alabama. I would be terrified. I think I would get jumped in San Francisco for doing that. Not that I would do it, but I feel like I should have the option to do it. I mean, I totally can't stand Donald Trump at all. I mean, anyone who follows my social media knows that. But I don't think that you shouldn't be able to wear a hat in society. This is a free country. So that's my theory on it, is that for some reason, again, we're in that middle ground where Hinduism is either forgotten or it's just considered weird. And, it's up to people who are in the public eye to talk about that. So the only thing they see isn't just Indiana Jones 2,
All right, thanks so much for answering that question. Our next one is coming from Bijoy Chakraborty, who is a student at Rutgers University.
My name is Shubhadeep, and I'm from Rutgers. And I wanted to ask you, as a South Asian Hindu, how did you deal with society questioning like your career choices of being a comedian? Like I know a lot of people and myself, like I've always looked into acting or being a singer. And right now I'm studying political science, which is different. But like, how did you deal with the pressure that comes from society going into something more creative than professional?
So BJ, it's a great question. And this plays right into what I was saying about how much society has progressed, right? You say political science is what you're being forced to study. That would have been completely out of the question in the 80s. So there is some progress. It would have had to have been medicine. Then the 90s, it's engineering and computers. And then in the zeros, it's law. And now it's like, oh, I have to study poli-sci. Gosh, I totally would have loved to have been a poli-sci and journalism major looking back on it. And my biggest regrets are not doing theater in high school and debate in college and all the things that I could have done. So I think in some ways, look, I think that there's the idea of parents really knowing, right? Because they used to be kids. Kids have not been parents yet, but parents used to be kids. The disadvantage they have is they usually forget what it was like and things change and all that sort of thing. But as much as I'm a comedian, I love to tear down the walls of society because that's what we are. We're anti-establishment. And as an artist, you can relate to that. I still believe you should follow conventional wisdom unless you have a reason not to, right? Unless you have a better solution. And so part of what this is having that, as I say, backup plan or plan A and plan B, right? And sometimes it's kind of great not to have a plan B. I remember coming out to California when I was 8 years old and I climbed a tree and I went really, really high up in it. And it probably wasn't as high as I think of it now, right? You don't remember the past, just like parents may not remember being kids, but it was empirically pretty high. I think it was at least 15 feet, maybe 20 feet high, way too far to jump. And I was not really that much shorter. I'm not that tall now, but I was smaller, younger, I guess you could say. And I remember walking out on a limb. So I literally was on a limb, if this was ever a metaphor, Bijay. So I'm walking out on a limb and I all of a sudden get really scared because I'm like up and I'm over. And how am I going to get down? It's easy to climb when you're going up, but how do you go back down? And so I see my dad down there and he goes, just jump, beta, just jump. You know, I'll catch you. Like they always have this confidence, you know. I remember many years later, he wanted me to ride like they do in India, like on the handlebars and go down our very steep driveway. And I go, there's no way I'm doing that. And he goes, come on, in India, they do what? I go, that's India, okay? You haven't lived in India in a long time. You came here in the early 70s. Don't talk to me about India. He goes, don't you trust me? I go, I trust your intent, not your ability, okay? I trust that you don't want to see me get scraped up. And he goes, that's a really weird way of putting it. I said, it's true. I don't think that you're going to be able to take me down the driveway. I trust you as my dad, but no, I'm not doing this. And so similarly, there was no way years before that I was going to jump into his arms. I don't think he could have caught me, even though I was light. Probably would have hurt him, whatever. So he goes, all right, then your option is you have to walk back on the limb to the trunk of the tree and climb down. So I stand up and I'm looking at the trunk. It looks really far. I'm really scared. And I'm thinking, okay, if I slip to the left, I can grab the limb this way. And if I slip to the right, and if I fall back, maybe I can. And then all of a sudden I just went, stop. There is no plan B. You can't fall, okay? If you fall, you're screwed. That's it. It is going to hurt like hell or rebirth. It's really going to hurt, okay? There's no way you can fall. That's it. There's no plan B. The plan A is you make it to the trunk and you go down. That's it. Okay. So there's something to be said for that, BJ, of just having no plan B, just going right in and saying, I'm going to be a singer. I'm going for it. I don't care. I believe it. That's all well and good. But they always say you can't save the world if you can't pay the rent. And I tell you what, it's really, really important, whatever success I do have. I was just having this conversation with Hersha, my wife, yesterday. You got to ask for honest feedback from your friends because generally, we're not going to give it to you. That's the difference between being a kid and an adult is kids give you unsolicited feedback. Adults don't. Okay. Kids love to be surprised. Adults don't. People generally don't want the answer. They don't. Like how good was it? How good was my painting, my drawing, my song, my dance, my stand-up set? Oh, it was great. You got to ask me 3 times before I'm going to go, all right, here's what I really think. Because I believe you don't really want to know. So it's important to be honest with people and ask them for their honest feedback. Am I a really good singer? What do I need to improve on? What can I do? Because as a comedian, I know what I do really well. I know things that I don't do as well. And that's the decision point I'm at right now is what do I do with the next couple of years? And that was a conversation I was having with my wife. I met with a Hollywood producer. He's like, what ideas do you have? This was just last week, Hindu guy actually. And I'm going, I don't know if I'm a good enough actor to carry a TV show. Like I'm a great host. I know that. And I know what I do. I'm a very good interviewer and stuff like that. But man, I don't know. And so it's just about being honest and having my wife tell me honestly, yes, I think you can do this, or maybe this isn't in your wheelhouse, and don't get all pissed off. Don't get all sensitive. It's going to hurt. You got to take it personally. It's going to hurt. But because failure, if you're going to take your successes personally, you have to take your failures personally too, right? So do it on the side, develop your voice, develop your talent, keep majoring in poli-sci. I realize how lucky you are. And you'll get there. I think the idea of just moving out to LA or New York and singing or dancing or whatever, it's really hard, and it's better to have something on which you could fall back in case you change your mind.
Thanks for that advice. I think that's really applicable for a lot of students. I think a lot of students out there are going to be holding on to that and hopefully keeping that second career there and also developing those talents of theirs. So thank you for that advice. So our next question is coming from a student at UMass Amherst, and her name is Shoili Banerjee.
Namaste, can you all hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was just wondering how you overcame your stage fright and anxiety or if that's something you still struggle with, how do you deal with it? Because I feel like that's a common question for performers and actors and musicians.
It is, how do you overcome stage fright and anxiety is something that a lot of us go through, probably everybody goes through. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to when I'm nervous. Every show is important, every performance is important, but there are times, I don't know how many people are watching Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. Okay, I just wrote a thing about it, and I loved the Bulls in the 90s, the Chicago Bulls. But I tell you what, it's, he talks about how he practiced harder than he played, and people didn't believe that, but it was true. And there's sometimes a show and there's like 3 people, and it doesn't really matter in the real sense. Every show is important, but somehow you're just really, really nervous. And in that particular night, it didn't really even connect to how many people in the audience, whatever. When I opened for Sri Modi, I wasn't nervous at all. I walked out on that stage like I was just walking into my kitchen. I don't know what it was. I just had it that night. And for most of this tour, I haven't been nervous at all. I remember there's a part where I dressed up as Gandhi, okay? And I have to take this, I actually have it. These are the eyebrows for the outfit, okay? I just happen to have it here. And I had to take off this peel the back of this thing. And it's really hard to do. So when you're nervous, you're kind of like shaking, right? I'm about to go on stage, sold out show in New York City, 200 people. And I'm just sitting there doing it. They're like, you're on in 2 minutes. I'm like, all right. And I'm just doing this, taking it off calmly, setting it there, having a sip of water, and I walk out on stage like it's nothing. I should be really nervous, but I'm not. I don't know. I don't know how it strikes sometimes. There was something going around, I think a couple years ago, and it was called Random Thoughts from People Our Age. It didn't really specify. Was it millennials? Was it older folks? Was it boomers? Who was it? But it resonated with a lot of people. It was all these insights. And I always think of an insight as something that makes you smile but not laugh. So it was stuff like, the only time I look forward to a red light is when I'm trying to finish a text, right? Stuff like that, where it's this kind of setup or premise or something like that. And one of them was, I don't know why it is, but every time I'm at work and we're in a department meeting and I have to state my name and department, I get so nervous. And we all do. It's so weird. I perform in front of tens of thousands of people, but I'm like, what's my name again? Where do I work? What do they want to know? It's just bizarre. Like there's no rhyme or reason to nerves. And what I would say is this, that I still get nervous for auditions. When I know something's a showcase, I have not overcome that. And that's been a problem because when I first got to Hollywood, I got to audition for really big roles. I didn't have the acting training. I was very nervous. And now I have the acting training 5 years later, but the Hollywood industry is like, well, we kind of saw him, right? So now I got to build my own path. So ironically, I have to sort of start all over. So it's good I had that meeting last week with the producer. So a lot of it is, some of it's confidence, some of it is just luck. But what I told Shuhini is, talking about being ready for this call, sometimes when we're nervous, it's good because A, it means you're taking it seriously. So embrace it. And they say that in acting, don't fight it, don't block it, include it. And that's the second part of what I was going to say of two, which is you can convert that potential energy to kinetic energy, right? There's some physics for you. So you can use that nervousness and that anxiety. I wouldn't lean away from it. I would lean into it and use that as your platform.
Awesome, thank you. So we do have another question from someone in our Zoom meeting. So our next question is from Andrew Vinod Lachman from the University of Maryland, College Park.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to ask specifically also because I'm an engineer, I'm majoring in mechanical engineering, but I don't plan to quit my major, but I was just wondering, how is the transition like moving from engineering to comedy? And do you still use your engineering skills to this day? Like, does someone just ask you, can you fix my engine real quick or something like that?
Thank you for that question, Andrew. So the question really is, what is the transition like from engineering to comedy? My wife just sent me this left brain, right brain thing. It's like the dress and the whole Yanni and Laurel thing and all how we see things differently. And that was actually in my latest show as well, just a perspective. And I think Hindus actually do this very well because Hinduism really is about tolerance. It is about that gray. It is about inclusivity and all those sorts of things, right? Of being in the middle and accepting people for that. That's really the essence of what it's supposed to be, is tolerance. And so, she sent me this left brain, right brain thing, and it turned out that I was left brain there, but it's in the the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, I'm an ENFP, and I've gone from ENFP to ENTP, where it's feeling and thinking and going back and forth. Part of my journey has been very left to right brain. Think about pre-med, and then engineering, and then being a purchasing manager, then being a marketing manager, and then working at an agency, and then going into comedy. This is a very left to right brain spectrum journey on which I've been. So what they would also say with stand-up is you bring whatever you can to the table. That's why the name of my show is What Do You Bring to the Table? Hassan Minhaj was my first guest, right? And I had Deepak Chopra, some other great Hindus on there as well. Will we call Deepak Chopra Hindu? We can leave that for another day. So I think so. So all of that is to say that you bring whatever you can. Stand-up comedy is either a mirror or a window. And when I go to perform in India, it's interesting because we have it the hardest, Indian Americans. People are like, oh, everybody likes to say they have it the hardest. We have it the hardest. I'll tell you why. Because when you're growing up in India and you're Biswa or you're Abish Mathew or you're Veer Das or you're Amit Tandon and all these people, they're homegrown, right? They're holding a mirror up to the audience. They're saying, this is what it's like growing up in Cyber City in Delhi. This is what it's like growing up, you know, at 100 Foot Road, is it, in Bangalore? This is like what it's like growing up in Agra, like all these different places. They know because they grew up there. So their experience, if they're making fun of it, it's through their own lens. It's a mirror they're holding up to the audience. The other way with stand-up is it's a window, right? Because the first one is he's one of us. The other one is he's one of them. So you get the people like white folks, black folks, Latino folks who go to India and perform. It's okay for them to make observations about how come there are cows in the streets and whatever else, right? Like it's crazier to them because they shouldn't know it. But as a Hindu American, Indian American going over there, if you kind of act like you don't know what that is, people are like, Arey come on, you know what it's like. Come on, you didn't come here as a kid. You know there's cows in the street. Why are you making fun of that? Like you're Hindu, right? So you have to thread that needle. You go back and forth between one of them and one of us. It's a mirror, then it's a window, and it becomes really, really difficult to do. So I think you try to bring whatever you can to the table. You try to bring those skills. If you're an engineer, show them what that's like. Most of the crowd isn't going to be a bunch of engineers. And if you're a dancer, if you're a singer, like you were just asking, right? So BJ was asking a question about being a singer. Then you should sing on stage. I mean, absolutely. Like if that's a skill you have, Maz Jobrani did my podcast and he talked about that. How if you could just do a basic impression or basic dancing, that's all a stand-up crowd wants from you. Your impression doesn't have to be that great. As long as it's close, people, I mean, Stephen Colbert and Alec Baldwin's impressions of Trump are not that good. They're fine. They're serviceable. There's a guy whose video has gone around now. That guy can do Obama and Trump like you're going, is that really Trump standing right next to me or Obama standing right next to me? So just if you're performing in that context, it doesn't have to be that amazing. So the answer to that is, yes, I use engineering. Yes, I use it to break things down, to think critically, to put things into spreadsheets, to match this up with that. And, to, you know, just this video I'm going to release next week, it's taking this piece and seeing how it matches with that and then doing some math calculations of time. I mean, it's whatever you can bring to the table. It's going to help.
Awesome. All right. So our next question is going to be coming from Rajiv Satyal. She actually has two questions, so hopefully she can ask them together.
Yeah, it's kind of the same question, Sohini, but thank you. So I had a question regarding you picked a creative career, which is common, but then I am trying to be a cop right now, which is not normal, being Indian Hindu, of course, and also a girl for a lot of people. So when you decided to pick a career that is not like common, like medicine and engineering, of course, there had been a lot of questions that would have came to your way from like society. If not your parents, it has to be like society, people around you cares a lot more. How did you dealt with those type of pressure that came?
Yeah, it is really hard. I think the more you deviate from that, the joke I was telling somebody asked, do you have like a Hindu or a relatable joke like that? It's like when people say, you know, what did your parents, I always say that when I perform in a diverse crowd or mostly white crowd, the first question the comedians get is, how'd you get started? When I perform for a mostly Desi crowd, the question is, what do your parents think? And I always say, well, luckily my brother is gay, so I really lucked out on that one. So, you know, I was able to kind of fly under that radar, as it were, or gaydar, however you want to say it. So I think I think at a certain point, of course, parents want the best for their kids, right? They want to see their kids do better than they did. And, you know, it's such a low percentage field, entertainment. Of course it is, right? I mean, they always say that whenever there's a new community in a country, the first generation saves, the second generation spends, and the third generation wastes. Okay, that's just how it goes. And there's a progression of the most important job in a society would have to be a doctor, right? I mean, what else could it be? I guess you could say a guru or a philosopher or a teacher. I would not agree with that. I guess you could say without a teacher, how are there doctors? Yeah, chicken and egg, I get the argument. But doctors are obviously the most important profession. I mean, especially right now, you could see it, doctors, nurses, the medical profession. So it is the most stable thing. You're going to have 100% job security. And so it's going to go down, quote unquote, from there. Then what do you need? You need to understand the physical world and engineering and all that. So that comes. And then you have people in law and in business. So entertainment really naturally does fall towards the bottom of that because you don't, quote unquote, need it, right? Now we're all going crazy. We're on lockdown. I told Hersha, my wife, I just said, gosh, if people really want to shut down America, now the hackers who said they could shut down the entire internet in 17 minutes, this would be the time, right? We would really go crazy without the internet. So, and without entertainment and human connection and all that. So I think that's really what we have to think about as entertainers is how do we, you know, the more you deviate from that. If I'm Indian, I marry an Indian woman, that's points, man. That's points. All right. Now maybe I can go be a comedian, but dude, if I would have brought home like a white dude, like I mean, come on. This is now like, parents, I really identify as a woman. I'm like, they're just, giving me headache. Like, I mean, how different from the standard model, like, marry an Indian woman, work as a doctor. Like, come on, how many gifts can they grant you? So I think part of that is just proving that they can see that. And I always talk about going from supporters to believers. Your friends have to support you, right? And you were asking, what can we do to support Hindu comedians? Maitri was asking that question. It's like, that's support, but belief happens in their eyes, and you could see that over time where it's earned. You step off stage, and my mom looks at me and she's like, "Wow, okay, you've arrived. Like now I get it. I see it." And you got to fight for that, and that's good that you have to fight for it. It'd be sad if people just gave you their belief. You have to earn their belief, and you have to earn their respect. So I think that's where it comes from.
Awesome. We're now going to go over to a question from one of our youngest members. So Bhuvanesh Prabhakar is a high school student at Bridgewater Raritan High School, and he has a question for you.
Namaste, Rajiv ji. The common narrative touted by the right is that representation in entertainment in and of itself is an irrelevant issue because comedic media is meant to be funny and nothing else. I am curious as to what you believe about this argument because it is the primary method by which Hindus, or any subgroup for that matter, are delegitimized in the entertainment field. So what would your rebuttal be to those who say that identity and comedy must be strictly separate?
That is a really good question. These are all really good questions, but that's really great. So you're saying, what's a rebuttal to those who say that identity and comedy have to be different? Look, I would say that which is most personal is most general. And that is always true. I think it was E.B. White who wrote or said, do not write a story about man, write a story about a man, right? You need to get specific. And the more specific you are, that's been interesting. I was at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, and Judd Apatow dropped in. And, he did stand up. He's really nice. We talked to him for a while afterwards in the lobby. Super cool guy. Obviously, huge producer, director in comedy in this millennium, probably the biggest one. And he did this bit up there, and I talked to him about it afterwards. I said, what you admitted up there on stage, here's what he said. He talked about how he has OCD tendencies, and how when he's watching TV, this is so bizarre, he'll tap with his fingers on his toes. Like, he'll count the number of syllables, and if it doesn't end on an even numbered syllable on his right side of his toe, that it bothers him, and he has to watch the next commercial. And it was this weird thing. And I went up to him, I go, dude, I think a lot of people do that. And he goes, right? And I go, that is way more personal than any sexual fantasy thing you could have shared. Like, that would have just been funny and out there and whatever. But the fact that you went so weirdly personal, that resonated with the audience. People kind of went, whoa, that's weird. I thought I was the only one who did that. And I think that's where Hindus are today. We find ourselves in this position of like, well, no one else is sharing it right now, and so I don't know if I can. And you look at like Rami or some of the shows that have won, Golden Globes and things like that. It is about sharing that experience. And, what's your job as a comedian? There's a difference between simple and easy, okay? Easy is always simple, but simple isn't always easy, right? You could find something that's very simple. It's a simple question. Why are we here? It's a very simple question, not an easy question. But when you talk about ease of talking about something on stage, that's where it becomes a little bit more nebulous. Like, how do I bring this identity to bear? How do I say something that's going to resonate with people? And these are the certain things that are very simple for us to understand, but it's difficult to explain to people. And ultimately, if Hinduism is this complex topic and it's something that you really are, it's being able to explain that. And people do have to understand that that is part of our identity. And if other people relate to it, that's what you have to bring to the table. So in comedy, we always say that it is a simple job. It's not easy, but it's simple, which is make people laugh. It's 3 words. Easiest thing to define. You got to make people laugh. So the primary purpose of comedy is entertainment. But a lot of the reason people want to hear from us, when I was doing my first one-man show, the solo show about dating, it's called No Man's Land. You can look it up on YouTube. And, it's a really long show, whatever, but I talk about being Hindu, Indian, growing up like this. And I had about 15 people over to my apartment, mostly Indian, mostly Hindu. But I had a couple of white folks, a couple of Christian folks over. And I remember this director, Judith. She's directed a number of things out here in LA. And, she said 2 things. Like, okay, I'm going to read this to everybody. Everybody's got their drinks and whatever. They're all set up with their food, their samosas, whatever we had. And, I said, okay, nobody talk. I'm going to read this out loud to you. And then at the end, I'm taking questions. And then I've got my feet up. I got my hands behind my head, and I'm listening, and I'm kind of holding court. And she said 2 things to me. She goes, first of all, I don't understand why you think it's this loftier thing to be an actor, and you need to read your script and get through it than it is to do what you're doing right now, which is to host. She goes, you're so good at going amongst people and bringing things back to people, what they said before, and this is what Maitri said, and this is what BJ said, and bringing it back. She goes, that's a skill that a lot of people don't have about the stage fright and anxiety. You should lean into that. That was the first thing. The second of 2 things she said is, I love your stories about dating in America and all the other things like that. That's great. But she's like, I can get that from Mike Birbiglia. I can get that from anybody. You know what's interesting to me as a white person? The arranged marriage thing, the dating within your culture thing, the possibility of your mom saying, we're going to go to India and find you a nice girl. She goes, that is a completely foreign, quite literally, concept to white folks in this country. That's what you need to talk about, because I can get that other stuff from other people. And so that's ultimately what it's got to be about. That's the counter argument. Is my dad became a salesman. He wasn't a doctor. He became a salesman for General Mills in the 70s. And the white manager straight up told him, he goes, there are no Indian salesmen. Like, how? They're doctors and she goes, why are you going to go into sales? I can't hire you. You're an Indian guy. And my dad hit him immediately with, that's why you should hire me, because I'm the only one who's going to be an Indian salesman. I will be remembered. I'm a product that's going to stand out. And he got the job.
Awesome. So our next 2 questions are going to be coming from Instagram and Facebook. So the one question is from Amy from the University of Pittsburgh. How do you stay rooted in your Hindu dharma with your busy lifestyle? Do you have any tips for busy students?
Do I have any tips just generally for busy students? Is that the question?
In terms of staying rooted in your Hindu dharma. So like, how do you incorporate Hindu dharma in your busy lifestyle?
Got it. Okay. So I have been doing meditation and yoga every day, haven't missed a day, and probably for 4 years. Okay. Something like that. And so there's a Japanese proverb that says, if you want to be great at something, do it for a minute a day. And the thought really there is that you're going to do it for more than a minute, right? To get yourself to go to the gym, you don't say, I need to go work out for an hour and a half. You say, I'm just going to get off the couch, right? Okay, I'm just going to put on my shoes. That's how you get a girl back to your apartment, right? We're just going to go up to my apartment. So it's the same idea there, right? It's just the next small step. You're like, okay, I'm just going to put on my shoes. I'm just going to get in the car. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go to the gym. I'm going to lift one weight and I'm going to get out. And it's the same thing. I think with incorporating your faith, you have to make a conscious or subconscious, you have to make a conscious effort. And I think you have to use the flow of energy, because a lot of people talk about how they get up early in the morning and they can get a lot of work done early in the morning when nobody's doing anything and the phone isn't ringing. Well, my circadian rhythm is just that I have a lot more energy at night. Okay. It's just the way I am. The world is built for morning people. I wish I were a morning people, probably the way that women wish they were men, or I wish I were Christian in the 80s. Okay. Like, that's just the air you breathe. It's a man's world. Men just have it easier. If males don't recognize that, you're being a jerk. You have to understand this world is built for men. We're all equal, but dude, women have it much harder. Okay. Much harder. And it is much harder for night people. Okay. I'm not equating those 2 things, but it's hard being a night person. It's just, the world is set up to win. If you can get up at 5 a.m. and get your ass moving, man, you're in gear. I don't have that. On any given day, if you're like, tonight, you have to stay up till 5 a.m. or you have to get up tomorrow at 5 a.m., which one are you picking? I'm like, I will stay up till 5 a.m. tonight. That's way easier than getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Forget it. I'm not doing it. So I think you have to lean into that energy of just going, oh, fine, then do it when you can. Build it into your day at a time where there's a path of least resistance. And even though I do meditate and do yoga in the morning, I do think that you have to make it part of your day consciously. Put it on your to-do list. How are you going to get it done? And don't make it this thing where I was talking to a friend of mine, Desh, who has said to me, well, to really make meditation work, you got to do it for 2 hours a day. And I'm like, look, man, I'm not doing it for 2 hours a day. Okay. People who do that don't really live in society. Okay. There's an old Hindu tale about the man I'm going to tell it wrong, but in the village, who prays to God every day when he meets God, and he asks, who is your most devoted follower? And God says, it's this other man who lives down the street. Some of you are nodding your heads. You know what I'm talking about. And, this man says, no, but I pray to you every day. And they said, okay, I have an assignment for you. Carry this oil, right? This oil that's filled all the way to the brim, carry it to the next town. And he can't even move it a little bit or it's going to spill. And he goes on this very treacherous journey and cannot even drop a drop of it. And, 3 days later, he gets it there. And he says, God, did it, son. And he's like, now who's your most dedicated follower? And God's like, well, how many times did you pray to me during that time? He goes, well, I was doing this. He goes, that's why the man down the street is a farmer. He's tilling the field. He's raising his family, and he still finds time to fit me into his day. It's not just about getting on your knees and praying to God every day, all day. God is everywhere. We're not just pantheistic or theistic. We're panentheistic, right? God is in everything and is everything. So in us and also around us. So I think that's really the key, is just to fit it into your day, but don't set these ridiculous standards. I have my mala beads right here, right? You could probably see them. So I count them every morning. And my mom specifically said that to me when she gave them to me. She goes, I know you have your whole routine and you have to have no shoes on and you have to shower and you have to light your doob and you have to do all this stuff. She goes, I do that. That fits into my lifestyle. But she goes, look, if you already put your shoes on, just count your mala beads, okay? Don't put that pressure on yourself. It's ridiculous. You're not going to do it then. You're going to put your shoes on. You say, I'll do it when I get home. Just do it when you can do it. And don't have all these rules and crazy things that you can do or not do. It's just, I don't know. I don't think we should judge each other for that. I think you do what you can do, and you got to do what feels right for you.
Awesome. So I think we have time for just one more question. And I think we did get a lot of questions online, and hopefully we can answer those separately. But our last question comes from Harsh Agarwal, who is an alum of the University of Pittsburgh.
Namaste, Rajiv. I just want to phrase this really quick contextually. I went to a show recently for Hassan Minhaj live, and I really enjoyed the show a lot because I think he's fantastic, but also I really related to him as an Indian American growing up here. So his jokes really resonated with me. Kind of along those lines, I haven't really heard that many jokes that could relate to the Hindu upbringing that I have, and so many of us here have as well. So that kind of led me to wonder, do you have or have you told any jokes or one-liners centered on Hinduism or Hindu stories, or the calling to the Hindu upbringing that we can relate to?
That is a really good question. The idea of, are there specifically Hindu jokes? Okay, so what I would direct you to, and Shohini can send this out, is a link I have, Why Indian Americans Have It So Darn Good. And I definitely talk about that a little bit. I mean, I said that at the beginning where I say, and I actually say this in general audiences too. I say, I was born in Cincinnati. Well, I'm Hindu, so I was reborn in Cincinnati. And so that is a joke that does seem to resonate with people because people understand the idea of rebirth and karma and all those sorts of things, karam and all those things, dharam and all those concepts that are in our religion. I will have to think about if I could string together just a specific Hindu set. But one thing I do talk about is there's a video online when I was talking about the No Man's Land, the dating show. And interestingly enough, we had gone out to the desert to film the promo. And I hold these signs and I talk about how is there only one person out there for me. And I do the math and I get it all the way down, and it was actually supposed to be twice as long, but that day the wind was blowing and I couldn't flip the signs fast enough. It's weird on a shoot, the things you can and cannot do. That's why when people talk about models now, how easy they have it, models have it really hard, okay? They have it hard. I'm not here to defend models necessarily, but it's difficult to A, stay that thin, and B, do the weird things they have to do. Like I'm talking about peeling back this mustache and all the weird, skills that you didn't think you'd as an engineer, right? Or anyone like Andrew was talking about being an engineer, things that you didn't think you'd have to do. And so there is that aspect of having a difficult thing that you have to do. So at the end of that video, the number that I could find, and my wife, of course, doesn't want to hear this now, that there were 108 possible women out there for me. When I landed on 108, that's the same number of mala beads that there are. And it was this really crazy thing. How in the world is it the same number as that? So it's something I talked about at Hindu American functions and all those sorts of things, that was the number that led me to that. And also, by the way, this is a real thing. When I wasn't getting married, becoming 37, 38, we did a puja. And within 6 months, I met my wife. So these things do work, man. There's something for it. There's something for all this. So I'm going to see if I could string together a specifically Hindu thing. But I've definitely done my jokes about cows. And I actually wanted to name my special, it'd be me with a cow, and it wouldn't be called the divine comedy, it'd be the bovine comedy. So I thought that would be pretty good, So there's definitely some Hindu stuff going on. So I think we got cut off on Instagram. By the way, sorry to the people we haven't answered. I see some other questions coming up here, but I'm letting Shohini moderate because there's so much good stuff coming in here too. And wow, we're at an hour. We said we were going to do half an hour. We did an hour. So
Yes, so I think we are going to wrap up just because it's been time, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions that we got from people online right after this. But I do want to thank Rajiv so much for spending time with us today. You are an inspiration to so many young people out there who are interested in pursuing the arts. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch. We appreciate your support for Hindu Students Council, and we're planning to do more career talks with amazing people pursuing creative careers. To get more information about our upcoming events and how you can get involved, you can follow Hindu Students Council on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And please donate generously to Hindu Students Council by going to the Hindu Students Council website and clicking donate. Your donations ensure that we can have more of these amazing virtual events and hopefully bring Rajiv back to more events in the future. And if you want to learn more about comedian Rajiv Satyal or invite him to your next event, you can find him on all different media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Funny Indian, or visit his website at funnyindian.com. So Rajiv, I want to turn it back to you for a minute. Do you have any last closing words?
Thank you very much, Shohini, for having me. I really had a blast. Some really, really great questions in here. We apologize to anyone to whom we didn't get, but I think we got to most of the questions. And if you have any further ones, you can always email me at rajiv@funnyindian.com. And as Shohini was mentioning before, you can follow me. I'm at Funny Indian pretty much everywhere but TikTok, I think. TikTok, I think I'm just Rajiv Satyal, but that's not so bad since that's a Hindu name after all. So I, again, wanted to thank Shohini for setting this up and the Hindu Students Council for having me. I really, really had a great time, and just again want to thank everyone. And please get involved with Hindu Students Council. Be proud, be a proud Hindu. Get out there, talk about it. And I always find that people engage with people a lot more if it's not I'm right and you're wrong. It's more about just sharing another point of view and having a dialogue with people, because that's the only way that people are going to learn more about who we are and what we do, as opposed to getting it from the media or getting it in a way that we are not really able to convey ourselves. So consider donating to Hindu Students Council, and this is important because without some of the funds, they cannot really do these awesome events, and we may be on quarantine for quite a while. So let's stay connected.
Thank you again, Rajiv, so much. And thank you to all the HSC supporters out there, all the people who organized this event today. And thank you again to our partners at Mana TV. And namaste and good night.